Selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to do we just hit 1 million orders stage, Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify's the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/audioboom, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/audioboom now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/audioboom.
6 Minutes in Eternity. Philip Hasheider is an award-winning writer. He's also a farmer, and he's the author of 30 books on farming, local history, and family stories. But the book we're talking about is completely different. He had an NDE.
Those 6 minutes were the absolute demarcation line in my life. The before that time is, I can remember a lot of my life, but it doesn't hold the same significance now as it did then.
This book is about that. How long is 6 minutes? He compares it to about the time that it takes to make a sandwich or brew a cup of coffee. And during that time, he says he experienced eternity. You had an NDE that you pretty much walked away without any repercussions, unscathed, which astounded the physicians and your family and your relatives. But there's 8 hours in there that you say you had no memory, and yet you were interacting with people around you. So first, it's an excellent story, and thanks for sharing it, because I know this took a little time for you to work through to decide how you were going to share it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Wendy. Yes, the 8 hours are still gone. I was told by numerous people, especially my wife and our son and daughter, that I was talking with them. I was answering questions, especially to the medical staff who kept asking me questions, I was told, and I kept giving them answers. I kept making jokes. I was apparently cognizant, although I don't remember any of it. And I didn't even know I had died. The last thing that I remember in the Wellsprings fitness room, which our local hospital runs, was looking at my 2 forearms when I stood up, and they were both tingling, like when you lie down and have an arm under you and you wake up and roll over and it starts tingling because it had fallen asleep. Well, both of those did that. And I thought, that's really strange. And that's the last thought I had until 8 hours later. And it was those 8 hours after I regained some mental stability and comprehension a week, 2 weeks later, it was those 8 hours that I wondered what happened. Because I had had this extraordinary experience of being in a completely different dimension from what I had been at the fitness center.
Okay, so just to go back and revisit what happened and how did you end up there? What was going on that morning or prior to? Did you have any clue that you were going to have any kind of a health issue?
No clue whatsoever. And I'm going to have to go back, and I'll give you a short description. I have to go back about 1.5 years because these different pieces all coalesce in the end. And about a year and a half before this happened, I had, for the last 50 years, I had been a Red Cross blood donor, whole blood, plasma, platelets. And I had gone consistently about every 2 weeks. And one series of about a 4-month period, they give you a card and they take your blood pressure and they put it on the card so you have a record of it. Well, my blood pressure kept steadily rising over time. Not one time it'd be up, another time it'd be down, but it was consistently moving upward. And one of the technicians that was taking my vital signs looked at my history, and she said, well, we can't take you today because your blood pressure is 140 over 102. Well, the break off for giving blood is 100. That's the bottom number, the diastolic number, and that should be between 60 and 80, but mine was 102. Thankfully for her, in looking back on it, she didn't have to say anything. She could have just handed my card back and said, well, we can't take you today. But she tapped the card on the table that she was sitting at with me beside, and it was like she wasn't sure she was allowed to say anything. But finally she said, your pressures have been reaching the hypertension plateau. You really need to talk to your physician or you could possibly end up with a stroke. And so that was all she said. And of course, being a farm kid, I had seen over my life numerous farmers who had strokes. And I knew it was not a very good thing for the family to deal with, let alone the person. But wives became caretakers then for the rest of that person's life. It's not a very good thing. So I wanted to avoid having a stroke. So I went to see my doctor, and who was also a personal friend. And he said, well, we can do two things. We can put you on blood pressure medicine, or we can get you enrolled in a fitness program run by the hospital and help you work with it that way. Well, that sounded more appealing to me, and that's what I did. And so I started my fitness program in February. It's supervised. It was supervised. It still is. And this went on until beginning of February. On February 5th is when I was in the fitness room and I collapsed. Fortunately, there were people there who immediately came to my aid, from what I was told. The other fortunate aspect was that across from the street was the local ambulance service. So I got doubly lucky that day. And that is where it all began. And it took them over 6 minutes to get my heart restarted. It was during that time that I had my other dimension experience. And once they did get me back, within 20 minutes, they said I looked normal, like nothing had happened to me. My color was good, although it went from an ashen gray to looking alive again. So that was an interesting aspect of what I sought to understand after I had enough time to recover. The ironic thing, well, not so ironic, I know it's not, there are no coincidences to this. I was somehow guided to make the decisions I did. That morning, before I went into the fitness center, I had been out in the pasture with our cattle, walking around with them, or I attempted to walk around with them. When I got out there, they all kind of perked up and looked at me. And this was the group of cattle that I had been able to walk amongst, get close to, pet, scratch their back, whatever. But this morning, they all looked like they'd seen a ghost, is the only way I can explain it. One of them took off, tail up in the air. If anybody's ever seen cattle run, that's about the way they do it, and got about 300 feet away and stopped and turned around and looked. Well, then the rest of them followed and did the same thing. Well, I didn't think anything of it. I had seen what I wanted to see because nothing needed my attention at the moment. So I went back to our house, walked back to our house, which was a good almost half mile back to there. And then I went into our local town where the hospital's fitness center was, and I changed my clothes, went upstairs, said hi to everybody, stretched, and proceeded to do a few arm curls, got up, and that was it for 8 hours.
I'm curious because of the cattle, and animals see things that we don't. And my pets, same thing. They let me know when somebody that we don't see is here. And I wonder if they saw your crew around you, the non-physical crew around you, that gave them an idea that things were going to be just a little bit different that day.
Well, that's the only way I can explain it. I mean, because they had never done that before. And after I got home, they didn't do it then either. So it was that one moment. But again, there were 3 points along the way that I realized after I was able to, now a year later, when I was looking back on all this stuff, the 3 points that struck me was, one, the nurse who went out of her way to point out that you need to look at this problem. 2, the doctor who got me into a fitness program. And 3, I was in the most opportune place at the precise time, most help. Mm-hmm. And I was across from an ambulance service. Now, I don't believe in coincidences. I think people can call it that if they wish. That's not my term for it. But I think that I had guides. And the reason I say that is that, to me, guides provide you with the opportunity to make decisions. I'm not sure that they provide the actions here. I think that is what normally happens in life on its own. Mm-hmm. But they allow you to make decisions. And that morning, I made a decision to leave the field and go in and work out where I could get help. Had I decided to stay home that day, as the doctor later told me after the surgery, that it was going to happen sometime, but where it happened, no one would be able to predict. Eventually what they found was that there were 2 blockages that restricted the blood flow, which knocked the heart out of its rhythm, and that's what caused my collapse.
And that was also convenient. At one point you said that while you were in there, I mean, you were talking to people or to someone that no one else could see, having a conversation. And at one point overnight, you were having a conversation, and your wife, Mary, said, I needed to write it down because this was a conversation. And then you had no memory of that either, but it was a very coherent conversation. So you were able to get some insight having her there to write it down. I thought was convenient.
Yes, that happened quite a bit later as I was starting to work through all this, and that also when I had healed a little bit. It really took a long time to get my mental faculties back. I mean, I would see people I knew and couldn't remember their names. But they told me that would slowly come back because there was no damage to my heart, which is the thing that really surprised them, mm-hmm. That there was no damage to it. And my wife kept saying that you look fine. I got to the emergency room and I couldn't figure out why you were there because you looked good. You were talking, you were laughing, you were joking, and yet that you had 6 minutes when your heart had stopped.
If you're beyond 6 minutes, you're gone. Normally,
that's what I was told. Yeah, that's what I was told. And so, was it luck? I don't believe that. I believe there was more to it than that. And the conversation you referenced happened about a year and a half later as I was beginning to question why all this happened. Mary said that I woke up in the middle of the night and rambled on. Well, not rambled on. She said I was coherent, and told her that this is the reason I was back, was to be a conduit to those who don't feel any hope. And then she said I went back to sleep, and that was it. But she was prescient enough to write it down, because I didn't realize what I had said. I had no idea what it meant at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't something I asked for. I mean, I didn't ask to drop dead. I mean, I didn't ask anybody to go, and I still did. So it's just like a disobedient boy without getting anybody's permission. So, part of my book is trying to explain what happened. That's the easy part, is to explain how I collapsed, or why I collapsed, or what happened prior to it. I mean, that was fairly easy. But to understand why it did was a real challenge. And then the other challenge was to try to formulate what happened, or what I experienced when I got to another dimension, and try to explain it in human words when there's no human language involved in that dimension. So I did a lot of thinking as to how to explain it and find words that would approximate what I did. Some I think I've done pretty well with. But when you're in a nonverbal, non-linguistic atmosphere, it's kind of like trying to explain the colors of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the real challenge. But it was after I was healthy enough to really think these things through. The drive was to understand, especially those 8 hours where I had no recollection. So I did interview all of the people in the Wellspring Center who had a hand in, doing CPR, assisting the EMTs who showed up and used electric shocks on me 2 times for sure. Maybe it was 3. Nobody seems quite to remember. But regardless of the number of times, it took a little bit to get me going again. It was trying to understand that, which was the motivation. So by interviewing those people and talking to them, I was able to slowly start piecing it together. Each person I talked, they may not have had an idea as to what the person next to them or across from them was doing, but they knew exactly what they did and every step they took, because an event like that apparently really imprints upon a healthcare person.
Yeah. You mentioned that you did a presentation for the healthcare professionals, and somebody was concerned because before, when they've done that kind of extraordinary measure to save somebody and they aren't in good physical health, they've broken ribs. And so that person was concerned about the pain, and you were able to say, okay, that saved them.
Yeah. Well, I didn't feel the thing. I mean, I got lucky, I guess, from that standpoint. I mean, I didn't feel any pain when I collapsed that I can remember. I didn't feel any of the pain of Chris, who was this big young guy, crushing on my chest to keep my heart going with the CPR. It just made me think that there has to be a reason for this, and apparently the reason was because I needed to provide some sort of comfort to those who have hope. Now, that's not. I'm not an egotistical person saying that's going to sound that way, but it really is a matter of fact. And as I worked through writing this, and it took me over a year just to get it into a first draft form, it became obvious that there were things here that other people really needed to hear, or at least I felt they did.
Mm-hmm. Part
of it is about what happens after we leave here. Now, everyone's experience, from what I understand, will be different. I mean, there are going to be a lot of generalities of leaving this plane of existence and going back to where we came from. But there will be, I suppose, individual differences. I can't say. I can only explain mine and what I remember from it. And I'm convinced that I don't remember it all, because I use an analogy that the information, the enlightenment, what I experienced was such a higher plane of information, intelligence, compassion, that I couldn't bring it all back here. It's like having a 2 gigabyte computer and having 1,000 gigabytes trying to get pushed into it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's going to fry something. So I do believe I was only given that amount of information I could safely handle once I got back here.
Part of it in your retelling and reliving and helping to spell some of these things out that isn't always included in other books is, number one, depression, and number two, the perspective of all the people who have been around you who then have to adjust to a different you, because part of you, like you said, that 8 hours, hadn't checked back into the material plane. You were still in between, and you talk about it, being able to connect, make that connection that you had as you were not in this full capacity human physical form, still in that spirit realm, and being able to just shut your eyes and you're there. And that's an extraordinary state of awareness.
Well, it probably was more frustrating for my family than it was for me, because I basically was oblivious to what happened. I did have the experience, but no one else did. And so for me to try to express it to them was difficult. And I've talked with Mary about this just recently. I don't know exactly what she went through because I didn't experience what she did for the same event or from our son and daughter. I can only say what I understand from what happened to me from my inside looking out. For anyone, and it's not just me, for anyone who's had an incident or an episode like this, the rest of the family or your friends are the ones who kind of get shoved to the side, mainly because they need to work on the patient. And Mary understood that, but she was really frustrated because whenever she wanted to suggest something, nobody really paid attention to her or even wanted to hear it. And
especially the meds. The meds was a big issue.
Yeah, that came about 6 months later. Well, after I left the hospital, I had this bag full of medications that I had to be taking. And it really was tough for me. And I say that because I was the one taking medications. But they did affect me. And eventually, the next August, I was back in the hospital because I didn't have any energy. I kept losing my balance. I passed out at the clinic again, which for anyone who wants to read the book, there's another story about the foolishness of thinking you can really take care of yourself when you're in an emergency situation. Mm-hmm. The medications really hit me, and it was the cause of my second collapse. Well, nobody listened to Mary. She could see it day in, day out, and she had to put up with it. Well, not put up with it, but she had to endure it, and not that she wasn't willing, but she was on pins and needles for a long time, and that gets to be a little stressful. And I'm sure there are other spouses who can resonate with that message. And it's not that I have anything against the medical community. I mean, they help save me. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to point the finger at them. I'm just trying to say that maybe they should listen to the spouse who sees the patient every day, all day long. And it also brought up part of the conversation that families really do need to advocate for whoever they're taking care of.
Yeah.
Because they're the only ones that can. I mean, the doctors are pressed. I mean, we could get into a long discussion about our healthcare system here, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do not digress.
I'll leave that there for another time.
Next book.
But there has to be a way that people look out for those who are needing the care. Yeah. As I mentioned in the book, I had a friend whose father was put on 12 medications. Now, maybe he needed half of those. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I can't say what everything was needed for. But I was on one statin. I thought I was a relatively healthy young man yet at that point, although Mary might question that, saying, well, you're the one who dropped over. I mean, okay. But I can't believe that those chemicals in a body, an older person's body, aren't interacting and just knocking everything sideways. I mean, it did. One did me. So what is it for a person who's smaller in physical size than I am, who has to synthesize all these things? Mm-hmm. But again, I digress. We're getting into an area where, well, okay, if anyone's really interested in that discussion, it's in the book. But
or talk with an older relative. You've had to,
Yeah. You really need to have a discussion. And if you wonder why some people aren't quite, well, I don't know, with it when you talk to them, it may be just plain medication. But again, I'm not going to criticize the medical community because I don't know each situation. But I think that those who are charged with or choose to be caregivers really do need to advocate. And that takes time. Mary found that out very quickly. Everything took time, and it was all me. She didn't have any time for herself. She had, really didn't want me to go outside by myself for a long time because she didn't want to have to come looking for me.
She was still working full time, which was an hour drive to and from for her to work. And then you also had the farm with the animals and those kinds of responsibilities, and farm work isn't a day in the park when you're talking about getting huge hay bales and using different kinds of farm equipment to go to and fro. Then you have to be basically on game to navigate getting up, stepping up steps, down steps, moving fast. There's all sorts of athleticism that people don't even think about when it comes to being a farmer that you were still expected and possibly not quite able to get back up to with that.
Well, that's true. And besides all of that, she had to keep the books, make the meals, plan our really sparse social calendar. Yeah, there was a lot on her plate. And so she was tired.
Yeah.
I mean, I was constantly tired from medication. And, things get a little frayed at certain points. And even though I had an extremely vivid other dimension experience, when I got back, I still have to deal with the same thing everybody else deals with. I mean, I wasn't given a special pass to forego any kind of inconvenience when I got back here. While I was there, I did. I mean, that was, pretty good. But coming back, dealing with life issues, yeah, I got angry. I mean, I said I wasn't ever going to get angry again. I was just happy to be here. But you do. I mean, it's human emotions. And so if there's a crossword said, it's got to be retracted because it wasn't meant. It was just the
emotion,
being tired. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of other people worldwide or in this country especially can understand that. Part of what I've tried to do is give people a way to reframe their anxiety, their anger, their hopelessness at the situation, because there is hope. There is a way to resolve things, and there is a positive outlook if you look for it. That's not all pie in the sky sort of stuff. I mean, it's just the way you look at the perspective of what you do. But one of the things that I did notice when I got back and started looking at this long term is that I liken it to all of these different points that I mentioned prior to my collapse, all coalescing at one particular point right there at the fitness center. And that when it hit me, when all of those different threads of my life came to that point, I zipped through a prism and came out the other side with a whole completely different set of eyes because I had been in another dimension.
Philip Hasheider, 6 minutes in eternity. A quick break.
Selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify's the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/audioboom, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/audioboom now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/audioboom.
6 minutes in eternity. Philip Hasheider. Each NDE is unique, and yours is more of an energetic level where you're not really associated with any kind of a layer of another reality where you're going back and talking about what happened in your. There's no life review that you have to go back and address. You went from here to essentially essence form, and in essence form, we don't have language. We don't need it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say, prior to this, I had not paid any attention to NDEs. I had not read any experiences. It wasn't in my field of wanting to research. I do a lot of career history, family history. I've written books on farming subjects. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse, as they say. But the ability to see another dimension was so profound. I mean, and I've had validation that what I saw is real. It's not something I've made up. It's not something I've dreamed of. I couldn't possibly make up what I saw because it is just, I don't have that kind of an imagination. So when you come back from something like that, or I did anyway, everything is different. There's a lot of things that, boy, didn't make any sense. Well, not sense. Didn't have as much meaning to me as they once did. And there are other things that became far more important. I guess that would be the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sounds. You talk about tones and sounds, and just a whole colors, essence. Just there's a you had to find language to figure out how to get this out.
Yes, that was the challenge. Is that I talked about it in the introduction that all words, and I've worked with words a lot. I mean, writing, but all words have a certain length, width, height, temperature. You can have two words that are, opposites. Like, think of the word anger, or think of the word love. Now, which one is softer? I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious. And part of that is cultural attachment to the different ones, because all words have a history of themselves and have been handed down through generations in how they are used. So if you can change the meaning of the word so that another person can understand exactly what you're saying, then you have some common ground. But you can have a conversation with someone where you use the same words and you have no idea what each other one is talking about. And that's happened to me. And that's why choosing words that explained what I saw was very, very important, and that's why it took a long time to write it.
Did you have a sense of any kind of future in terms of big scale, what's happening with what's going on here for the rest of us on the planet? Was there any kind of precognition element, or was it just you were out floating and having a fabulous time and thinking this will be great when I end up here?
I did not think I had left my body. I didn't realize it until all of a sudden I was, I likened it to floating in a raft. That's where I found myself when I finally realized where I was. And I thought, well, this isn't the fitness center. And
okay,
I looked around, and the first thing I saw was this, what I'll describe as a raft. And I was floating on these waves that kept coming at me. And they lifted me and lowered me like you were on an ocean of waves.
Mm-hmm.
But these were energetic waves. And then they would come straight through me. And then I would look at, I turned to look to the side and I saw my hand. Well, my hand wasn't my hand. It was this clear, energetic filaments that just kind of sparkled. And I finally looked around to see where I was, and I didn't see any sky. There weren't any stars. There was no blackness. And there was this huge, gigantic, I mean, that's a small word to explain what it was, sphere of golden light. And it was all these waves coming out from it. And it was what I would call, that's all I could think of, was that it was the source of creation. All creation. Now, you can call it what you want. You can call it God, or you can call it the divine source, or there's, how many hundred names for God. But it was that entity that I instantly knew this is where I came from at some point in the distant eternal past.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you do that unless there's a purpose for it? And when I finally reconciled myself to that, it was like I didn't ask for any of that. I just wanted to work out while I was in the fitness center. And I was given a gift. I've tried not to make more of it than what it was. I mean, it's an extraordinary gift. But I'm not running around with a placard saying, this is what happened to me, this is my experience, although I did come out with a book now. But this is my way of helping those who are a little bit on the fearful side of what happens, that it is pretty nice. And it goes back to now it goes back to my being somewhat oblivious after I got back and realizing, oh man, I'm not there anymore. I'm back here and all this crap. And it was really depressing. Like, it was so good there. Why do I want to come back to this? And Mary would say something and I'd just kind of shrug it off. And she'd feel like I didn't care. Well, it wasn't that I didn't care, that it didn't have the same before. I mean, those 6 minutes were the absolute demarcation line in my life. The before that time is, I mean, I can remember a lot of my life, but it doesn't hold the same significance now as it did then. I mean, it's not that I don't care about my family. I do.
You also said you went through, and I would call it a clearing process, things that no longer had the same weight for you, like old mementos, old trophies, old stories, things that you thought you would do on your list of things that need to be done, and all of a sudden they didn't need to be done anymore. So they didn't have the same value. Your focus and priorities changed.
They absolutely did. There's no doubt about that. I jettisoned a lot of stuff that, what do I want to keep this for? First of all, nobody else in my family wanted it. I'd ask, and well, if they don't want it, I mean, if I go again, they're going to end up throwing it out, so I might as well be the one to do it. Friendships still mean a lot. Family still means a lot. Money only from the standpoint is bills to pay, but whether I get, win the lottery and 40 million or something, that is really immaterial. And people look at me a little strangely, but I'm not going to take it with me again when I go. So it may be useful here, but it's not something that I have to attach myself to with a great emotional bond. Again, this goes back to being oblivious, and Mary I'm sure sometimes felt that I was not wanting to stay here because I just, shrugged my shoulders at something and just walk and do something else. And that wasn't the case. It's just that a lot of things did not mean as much as they did previous to that.
The hard part for a spouse, going through that's what you tried to illustrate, because there's a part of you that person up until that point knew backwards and forwards, reliable, dependable. I can predict every move almost that you're going to do for the most part. And she did at one point when you were being trying to do a clandestine teenage boy episode. And anyway, she knew that about you. But then all of a sudden you come back and you're throwing out things that sentimental value that all of a sudden had no meaning. And how do you figure out this new person? Because it's like having a stranger all of a sudden that you knew so well, and then this person appeared. You try to address that too. Yes,
and I've suggested to Mary that she needs to write her own book about the experience of a spouse who's been on the receiving end of an episode like I had, or some other traumatic, what we would term a traumatic experience of a family member, because there are a lot of people out there who have the same feelings, and unless they can find somebody to identify those feelings and work through them, it's something that's going to get buried deep inside. I can tell you one thing. A friend of ours has read my book, and she wrote to us and explained that it had brought up things that she had buried for a long time. But that's the only way you can heal, is to basically lance that boil. You have to get it out of you, and you can heal. I mean, it's tough. It is tough having to deal with some emotional things from the past. But otherwise, if you don't, they'll fester. And then you're not in any kind of a good spot to be able to help anybody. So I'm pleased for that. And I think that there is a message in the book for people to identify with, think about, leave themselves open to the impossibilities of what is possible, is the way I like to put it.
Well, what you said that stays with you is that at any moment you can connect to that space you were during your near-death experience.
Oh, yes, that's true. I can. It used to be I'd have to sit down and close my eyes. Now I don't, because I see it when I'm walking around. There is time travel. People don't believe that's true, but you can time travel. You can pass through the permeable sheen of time and space, because I've done it, and I can see it even though I'm standing here, and it doesn't bother me. It's just a real comforting thing to know that, okay, it's still there. I mean, I can look away, but it's still there. And it all comes back to the validation I got that what I saw was true, and I really don't care if nobody else wants to believe me.
What validated it for you?
Through two as guides. They provided the opportunity for me to make choices. And as I said earlier, one is to have gone out to look at the cattle, come back, go into town, be in a place where I could be helped. Now, all of those things could not have randomly happened. If that was all random, then I should probably go buy a lottery ticket. But it was a sequence that had to be set for me at some point. That's what I believe. The other thing is, I've worked with a gentleman named Paul Selig, and he's a conscious channel. And he's the most true channeling that I have ever run across. And I went to 3 of his seminars when they were here. One was in Madison, one was in Minneapolis, and one was in Des Moines, Iowa. And in February, after my collapse, there's a period in the process where you get to mirror yourself by looking through his eyes. And when he stepped in front of me, what I saw was this flash, this brilliant flash in his eye. And I knew instantly that it was the guide that I had been working with. And at that moment, I asked if everything was true that I had seen, and I got a yes. So take that as you will. After it was all done, I went up and talked with him and explained to him what had happened to me the previous October and what I had seen when he stood in front of me, mirroring myself. And he said he felt it, but he didn't know what it was. So it wasn't just me. It was some impartial person who experienced a process that they were talking to me. That's the best way I can explain it. I mean, I can still see that flash now. I mean, it's just, so everything that after that, I did not have any problem believing everything that I had experienced in the other dimension. And I'm happy with it. I mean, I'm satisfied. And like I said, I hope people believe me, but it's not going to change my opinion one way or another of what I experienced if they don't.
There's a part of this in your experience that I think is universal because it doesn't have the dogma. There's no religious attribute that makes it, go a certain direction. It's universal. It speaks to the energy at the central core element of humans and also animals. Anything that is in this world that we consider physical also has that spiritual essence component. And that is addressed, I think, in your NDE. Everything goes down to that basic energy form of awareness, existence, and that doesn't have any kind of a label attached to it. I like that. For me, that's how I see it. I don't see us as having all these restrictions and boundaries and barriers and walls. I see us as being fluid. And when you're talking about those waves, there's a different element that comes with that, whether it's an emotion or a feeling or a sense. Waves is really a universal application of an energy form. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. It certainly makes sense to me. I would add a couple of things. Eternity existed a long time before organized religions did. And so when you look at an eternal energy source, such as what I saw and experienced, we are part of that DNA. And I've likened it to being on an energetic superhighway, where in 1951, I got off that highway and I zipped down in to this dimension, and I became a child of my parents, and who I chose, and I grew up with them, and I've lived now over 71 years, minus 6 minutes, but when my body uses up the rest of its fuel, and it will, I will leave on the on-ramp back onto the energetic superhighway, and I'm going to keep going for eternity because I've always existed in eternity. I just took this little detour, and I'll take another detour at some point in the future. I don't know what it is, but there's no way that the energetic me, that part of me on the inside, is going to get destroyed. No, my body will get destroyed sooner or later, but the inner part of me won't, just like it is for everybody else, whether or not they want to believe it. All I can say is, well, just wait till it happens and you'll figure it out yourself. You'll find out for yourself that that's the way it's going to work. It's really kind of a freeing, it's really a freeing aspect of understanding eternity. And if you consider eternity, we're already living. Think of your, say, third, fourth great-grandparents. At some point, they probably thought of a time in the future when they wouldn't be here. And that would be their eternity. Well, guess what? We're now living in that portion that they thought was their eternity. In that respect, we are already living in an eternal dimension. Now, the body, as I understand it, is made up of a lot of cells, a lot of brain cells, a heart, a bunch of organs. But yet, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
By that, I mean, you can have me lying on the floor, basically dead, same me that was here 5 minutes before that, but yet something's different, something's missing. So what is that? That is the part of me that's always existed. It just went somewhere else for a little while. And then it eventually came back when they got my heart going. It said, I got to get back because he's now needing me back inside. So that is, you can call it a soul. You can call it a divine spark. You can call it a lot of things. But it is the inner essence of every person. And that cannot be destroyed. And that, to me, is what really is good news, because we're all going to go on another trip eventually, and we're going to find other dimensions, because there is more than just one, from what I saw. And it could be really exciting because you're going to do that forever. And when you think of what is forever, think about the longest time in the future that you could possibly imagine. And then think about the next day, because that's longer than forever. It's a time-space thing that the human logic cannot quite get its mind around, but it exists because it's a higher plane of enlightenment and information and energy. And that's where we come from.
After all of this, and you did take some time to figure out how to put it into words, but after your life, all your life experiences, your NDE, what do you think has been, at this point, the highlight? Maybe I should just say, not counting, personal close relationships.
Okay.
But the highlight, what was it that you think at this point you would name?
Being in front of this gigantic entity that I would call the source of all creation, it was just absolutely amazing. It's so profound. It didn't change. It just expanded to the edges of what I could see, but I could touch it. It's like a million suns all rolled into one, and more than that. But it was a feeling of warmth, acceptance, love beyond compare. There was no division. Everyone was welcome. If you want to call it heaven, you go ahead. But it was more than that. People have this idea of some in the clouds. Well, there weren't any clouds there. There weren't any stars there. But it was this huge amphitheater, as much as you could imagine. And there were these little sparks coming in and going out. And I took those to be those like me who were coming back because we were called back or we had left where we were in whatever dimension. We're coming back to the source. We're leaving from the source, going to an infinite number of universes that were out there. To not think that would be to not believe anything that I had experienced. But it's still, it's real. It was real to me. It's still real to me now. One of the things I do want to say is that when I saw these sparks go out, they weren't just human. They were animal, they were trees, they were, you name it, whatever you could think of. We're going out to a different universe. And so the animal kingdom has their own,
trajectory? Yeah,
but it is from the same source. That's where everything comes from. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
No, that's it. Yeah, it said that was the ultimate mind-blowing thing you could possibly have imagined that you never imagined even existed, and all of a sudden it's appeared to you, and now it's like the world is different, and so are you.
Yeah. It is like, wow.
Yeah, times 10, times 10, times 10. Yeah.
Well, and I come back to the idea of how could it not be that way? Because I brought it back with me. How could I imagine something like that and see all this stuff? I suppose some neurologists would, find ways to pick holes in that, but that's their choice. But it was so real. It was, and I can still feel it. When I think back to that, every time I think back, I still get this feeling inside me of how warm it is. It's just a glow. It was really quite the thing. Now, I wouldn't, I wouldn't encourage people to have a, sudden cardiac death to experience something like that, because they might decide they want to stay, and that may be good for them. I'm glad I've had that experience. I'm grateful for it because it really put everything back here into perspective for me. Yeah, I can get mad, I can get angry, but nobody cares about my anger, so why get over it? I can be more accepting of people. I can have disappointments, but, pick yourself up and go on. It's not the end. And I don't have to worry about what happens to me once I leave this body again. Now, Mary's not going to want me to do that anytime soon that I know of.
I think, yeah. Can I have a vote in this? Yes.
But or our children, they were pretty put out by it the first time. But it was a life-altering experience. There's just no way to get beyond that. And everything else is enjoy the beauty that we see around us. It's there because it's why we're here, to enjoy that and experience it. And when we're done here, we'll go somewhere else and we'll experience something else there. I can't say what that'll be, but I know it's out there.
6 Minutes in Eternity, and this is your Facebook page, and it's under Philip Hasheider Books. Go ahead.
Well, I should say that the Facebook.com is P. Hasheider Books, just P. P-H-A-S-H-E-I-D-E-R Books.
Okay. And the book is available now. And so all of this that you are doing now, you went from a farm community to basically a global community. You just expanded your horizons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I believe there's a message for everyone who reads it. Now, I can't tell them what that message is to themselves because they have to work that out. But there is something that I think will resonate with anyone who does read it. What I'm trying to get people to really read it for is the message of hope. And that's what I was sent back to do. So I've done my duty. I've written my book. And now when I get a chance to talk about it, I would like to be able to do that because I think it would be useful. I think it can be healing. And I think it, can be something that will help others talk amongst themselves about and maybe find their own answers.
Usually somebody who has an NDE also comes back with a little energetic boost. So I am guessing that even though you have your job accomplished of sharing this, that there was some fine print that they haven't told you about that will come to fore when you make your appearances, because they have a way of doing that.
Well, okay, thank you for the heads up. I appreciate that.
Yeah, in a good way.
I mean,
in a good way.
Yeah, well,
it's like,
sure. Part of what I wanted to say is that I'm trying to give back for what I was given, and this is the way. If I'm a conduit for others to be able to see this and experience a little more peace within themselves or with the people around them, then it's in return for what I've been given. That's the only way we're going to really change the world, is to look at each other as if we're equals. Because everyone's divinity comes from the same DNA of the source of creation. We're all together. We're all of the same source. So our separation here doesn't make any sense to me, because we are all one.
Like you said when you saw the spark with Paul Selig, it just look for the spark. Look for the spark. Those are your clues, your guidelines, your signs.
Well, it's there. I ask people to, before I say anything to them, turn their hands over with the palms up. And not that I'm wanting to get in a praying session, but it's a way to have a person be receptive versus have your hands turned down where you're not willing to accept anything. Or if they're clenched, that's not accepting. That's all I ask. We all have free will here, and we have to decide what's best for us or what makes sense to us.
I appreciate your time. I think with this, you offer a lot of perspective that is helpful from people who are around the person who has the NDE, the caregivers, the people who are the hospital, all the emergency personnel, everybody, where that isn't always a part of the story. And I think that's also very helpful. So very much appreciated that you're trying to give a wider view of what happens in these circumstances, because your experience by itself is extraordinary. Just all in itself is extraordinary. So the rest of it is like icing on the cake.
Well, I appreciate that. There are big questions, and the more we seek, the more we're able to find them. And I would suggest for people to ask. Don't try to close up. It was asked of me once whether I wanted to leave again. And I've found over time that that's the wrong way to phrase it, because I know I'm going to leave again. It's just that I don't have to right now if I choose not to. Now, there are life situations where maybe I can't avoid a car accident, say, or something like that might take me out. But I don't have to leave, and I'm a bit hesitant to use the word suicidal, but people who are that way do not have to be that way. They should ask for help. I made the mistake when I went through a period after I got out of the hospital of not asking for help. They gave me a card. The 4 days I was in the hospital, every day, 2 people came in and asked me a series of questions, and one of them was, are you depressed? And I kept looking at him like, why would I be depressed? I'm still here. I'm still alive. And before I left, one of the people who had come in to ask all those questions asked me or said, it might not happen next week. It might not happen in 2 months. And it might not happen for 6 months. But sooner or later, you're likely to go through a period of depression. That's been the historical part that they're aware of. And I said, okay. So she gave me a card. And wouldn't you know it, 6 months later, I went through this period of not really knowing what I was doing here, why I wanted to be here. I wanted to be back where I was. I had all this stuff to deal with. I wasn't feeling good from the standpoint I was tired all the time. And I neglected to call, to talk to somebody. And I just soldiered on, and I eventually came out of it the other side without hurting myself. But I would suggest to people, don't be foolish. Accept help where it's offered and when it's offered. Because the getting out the other side is a whole lot better than not, basically. So don't refuse help when it's given or offered.
This might actually be help. This book, perfect timing.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I think there's a message for people to work through. One thing that changed for me is I found I cannot get sad at a funeral anymore. It's not that I don't have feelings for the person who died or don't have feelings for the family, but it's no big deal to me anymore that someone has died, passed away, whatever you want to call it, because I know where their trajectory is. And most of the time, and I talk about this in the book, most of the time I think it's what we feel we've lost when they die, and not necessarily for their own good. But somehow we make the funeral about us or their death about us, which I think really isn't fair. But I understand human emotion, and I think grieving is a good process for people to go through, as long as it doesn't become excessive and prolonged. It doesn't have to last 40 years.
Yes.
I certainly don't want people to mourn for me for 40 years, because I'm not going to be here to see it anyway.
Yeah, it's like, oh.
Get on with your life. So,
it sounds like for what you experience and the way you explain it, you're more at peace with the whole process, period. It's just that there's a continuation. So there's not really a loss beyond the physical. There is, again, that reconnection.
Right. It goes back to getting off the energetic superhighway, becoming born here, spending some time here, and then leaving and going back to find another place to live for a while. It's pretty simple when you look at it that way, so that you don't really die. You shuffle off your body, which is extra baggage, because that couldn't exist in an energetic state anyway. We just come here embodied as another human being, because that's the species we are. And you come in with that light, that essence that makes you. And when you leave, you're still you. So, that's pretty good from what I saw. So I hope that the message of hope and peace is something that people can grab a hold of and embrace. And because there is. There are day-to-day problems here, but that's what we all signed up for when we embodied to come into this plane of existence.
I beg to differ. That was the fine print that we couldn't read. Okay, that you went to check. Oh, that part.
Yeah.
Oh, that part.
Who told me? No, nobody told me about that.
The NDE is the magnifying glass. Yes, this is what you signed.
That's right.
Get back there.
Big magnifying glass.
That's what you signed.
That's that forehead slapper.
Yeah.
I do ask a lot of questions. There's no doubt about it. But I was asking them of myself. And if I'm asking them of myself, I'm certain there are other people around who may be asking similar questions. Maybe not the same questions, but similar ones, trying to sort through their lives. So, if I can be of help to at least one person to help alleviate their fear of what comes next, then I will have hopefully repaid for what I was given.
I will put links in the description for the show. And if you have any more questions, read the book. That's the whole point. Read the book. And it's 6 minutes in eternity. The thing is about the 6 minutes is that is the far range of how long you supposedly, by our standards, by what they know now, you can actually be dead before you don't have the opportunity to come back, because that's the way our body works. So this was a miracle. And Philip is here to tell the story.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. 6 minutes in eternity. Available Kindle or Amazon. I'm Wendy. Thank you for listening.
Selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. And sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify's the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/audioboom, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/audioboom now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/audioboom.